The graphics changed, but the gameplay didn't. What was cool about the later Magics, though, they had better explanation for things. You had a spear, it did 1d9 damage. Also, it was 1d9 plus 1. You need a 9-sided die to do this. I don't even think mathematically you can have a 9-sided die.
I mean, I've got a D30.
Yeah, but that's a 30.
I can get to Whitland.
Yeah.
Get to Whitland.
D10, but you just take one of the sides off.
Just shave it down.
It ain't much, but it's honest work.
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gaming Theater Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a special episode that we're calling You Got Your TTRPG in My Video Game RPG. Now, to talk about what this subject is basically, in short, video games that are entirely based off of role-playing or role-playing type games. And we'll explain and explore more about that as the episode goes. But before we get started, let me introduce ourselves to some of the guests that are going to be here helping us out with this. Now, once again, my name is Leo. I'm the Geek Scorpion, and I'll be your host. And over to my right is going to be...
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashwood, WG Ashwood. I'm your fancy-focused charity streamer. You can find me on Twitch and TikTok and YouTube, all at Ashwood Audio, where we do various fancy-focused things and raise money for charity.
Great. Now, also with that, nearby is going to be our buddy.
Hi, my name is Dane. I go by DandDaine. That's DandDaine. I'm an award-winning DM, and I stream on Twitch as well.
Great. Now, also on our side, someone who's been on the show at least once before, but I'm glad that they're back.
I'm Derek Howard. I don't stream on Twitch. Apparently, I'm the only one not cool in this room. But I run a local board game D&D tabletop convention that is in July this year.
All right. And with that being said, let's take a quick trip over to the Magical Merch booth. So here we are in the Magical Merch booth. Now, this Magical Merch booth, when this episode will be coming out, will be just a couple of weeks before Gem State Gaming Convention. Now, to hear us a bit more about Gem State Gaming Convention, here's Derek.
So, Gem State Gaming Convention is a local festival, in my words, that celebrates everything role-playing, D&D, card games, and board games. I've been running this for, I don't know, at least 8 years. Everyone, at least Dane and Leo, have done stuff for me. I don't know if you have, Ashwood, the other gentleman here, but those two gentlemen have done a lot for me. And yeah, it's in July. We're having BattleBots there this year. A local group is doing it. They are the size of your palm. So anyone who goes to the con gets a free entry to actually view it, the battle on Saturday. Whether or not you participate is up to you. We're also running my mega game that I love, which is Watch the Skies, which is an alien invasion interactive game where you represent countries and you deal with the political nonsense that the runner makes for you. We are doing also a Vampire Requiem game where humans versus vampires try and take over the city. Caveat, I don't know if we're having the guest yet, so insert here if you want later. But yeah, it's people who want to run events can. We have someone who wants to do Twilight Imperium Battle Fest, whatever that means. That's going to happen there. Yeah, and it's at the Expo Idaho this year, so we decided to move it somewhere different to keep it cheaper for the attendees, because that's more important than me than anything else, is making sure that people who can go want to go and can afford to go.
Oh, yeah. And it's a great event. It goes on for 3 days. And it'll be a link in the description for if you want to get your own tickets to that. If you end up in the Boise, Idaho area, go ahead and check it out. Me and Dane will be there as well. With the GTV has a couple of different events that we are running, with multiple events. I think at this point we're up to 3-4 events that we're participating with, including, as we did last year, a podcast episode that we'll be performing live up there too. So there's a bunch of different things that are going on there, and I played Watch This Guys. It's a super fun thing. You should experience it at least once. That being said, let's go ahead and get back to the show.
I have 2 questions for Derek, though, actually, before we go back up the slide.
Sure.
Okay. What's up?
One, do I need to bring my own weapons to fight the robots, or is that like how does that work to battle
think
bots?
traditionally you need your own robot.
Yeah.
Well, whoa, hold on, I didn't agree to that.
Well,
I wanted to fight the robots.
I mean, I'm fine with you fighting the robots, but I don't think that the people who run in the robots will like that.
I mean,
So,
okay,
but as far as
fair
I
enough.
know, like it's a local group who actually like runs it, and like there's stuff that they do on the national level. So if you want to participate in this eventually, you can like I guess earn points like in other events.
That's really
So
cool.
yeah, it's I'm really excited about it. I think it's cool and new. The expos they're kind of excited too about it because they've never had anything like that there. So.
Yeah. My second question is, did you get my annual budget report where I'm gonna need like 200% more budget so that we can invite your fancy focused charity streamer Ashwood Audio out to the convention and have him be a guest there? Did you receive that from me?
Got lost in the mail.
Damn it. Okay, well I'll
Dang.
resubmit it.
So I mean, we'll talk afterwards
track it.
about that, Dane.
No worries.
No. We'll talk afterwards about that. If that's
Sure.
what you want, and depending on how much it is, I'm pretty sure I can put it in the budget.
I will say, y'all, from my own perspective, I have been going to Gem State Gaming Convention for a long time since it was before it was called Gem State Gaming Convention, shall we say? Spice and Rose is the another fan favorite, good member of GTP here. She's the official artist for the convention. It's an amazing time. If you like board games, card games, tabletop role playing games, games of all sorts, please feel free to check it out if you're in the area, or come on down. You know, if you live in the surrounding United States, or even if you want to fly in for it, it's always a great time. My ridiculousness aside.
I think that we are now good enough to get back to the show. Today's episode is going to be a bit different for that, so let me kind of explain for it. As we discussed before, and ironically, at our first time performing at the Gem State Gaming Convention, see our Dungeons and Dragons classes episode about this. There's a it's kind of debatable, but for the most part, and you can find it in a lot of history and lore for video games, that all RPGs, video game based RPGs, are based in one way or another off the Dungeons and Dragons tabletop game. Now, this has to deal with sort of people wanting to have an RPG experience, and how do you, if you have a format for it, Dungeons and Dragons was kind of one of the earliest ones for this. It's not the first RPG, but it's the one that made the most sense. And it's one thing that's Dungeons and Dragons' strength, especially in 5th edition, is people could easily understand the rules for that. Now, even back then, when it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or just Dungeons and Dragons 1 or 2, this was used as the template to build RPGs on top of. And so when video games became big, they started to add and implement these features into there. And there's a couple of and so what we're going to go over is a list of different video games from our own personal experiences that happen to be in this realm, where they are basically all trying their best to hit what used to be considered the holy grail of video game RPGs, to make it feel like a tabletop RPG.
Yeah, if you've ever had to do the scheduling boss with your group of friends or other people that you play tabletop role-playing games with, you understand how difficult that can sometimes be. It is much more convenient, and thankfully so, that you can sit down to a video game based around one of these properties and just sort of play on your own if you want to. You can have your own adventures. It doesn't require you to have a bunch of friends, which is, I think, part of the appeal, right? You get that D&D feel a little bit. It's a little bit different, but it still allows you to sort of have fun and connect with a world of fantasy and fun.
Now, as a caveat, there's no way we can get through all of them. The amount of video games on that are just in that are under this spectrum in the course of like 2 or 3 years could take almost an entire podcast episode on its own to do that. But going through the entire history for it, there's many of these games that are lost and considered abandonware. And so we would have to backtrack for it. Like, the earliest. So let's start with one of the most famous, because it's the earliest example of it, is the Ultima series. The Ultima series was the starting with Ultima 1, was considered by many to be one of the earliest RPGs. Not so much the first, but at least the earliest ones for that. The Ultima series is one that tries to base its core on the TTP RPG, specifically Dungeons and Dragons. But much like many of the games, they changed a couple names and variants just to have the information that they need to. Now, that being said, though, the Ultima series also there's actually like 9 or 10. So it started in the 80s. And they used very simple character movements. I went back and I was telling everybody this. Went back to, like, you know what? I haven't actually tried the Ultima series because I didn't have a computer back then. It was way older, and even then, I don't think it was too young for my age. So I went back, played Ultima 1, and I couldn't. Not because I couldn't play it, like it's one that I didn't understand what was going on. It's because I physically couldn't, because I have one of those gamer keyboards. So the 10 key, on the side, is missing. You need the 10 keys number button to start the game. So without that specific key to hit, I couldn't start the game. I had to skip ahead to Ultima 4 before I finally got to a point where I could play the game. Kind of.
It's like how you always have to look for the anything key.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Press any key, your any key that you need to press in order to start any game.
I don't have an any key. What do I do?
But yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to play a lot of the Ultima series, but there is also we also see this in MMOs, like Ultima Online is one of the earlier MMOs that pop up. But I think I want to say not Baldur's Gate. What's the Dungeons and Dragons one? I think EverQuest. EverQuest is kind of its background on it. Now, if you move on for a weird story for it, Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPGs on it is kind of the reason why you can say that it's got its weird claim to history has to be with a game called Black Onyx. And I actually had looked this up randomly because it popped into one of my research files for this. The Black Onyx is designed by the game designer who built this up. As it turns out, he was studying in Hawaii and ended up playing a ton of Dungeons and Dragons there. Ended up moving to Japan. When he moved to Japan, he ended up developing Black Onyx to develop as basically, because in Japan, there is several different, at the time, RPGs was considered a niche, because an even further niche is to have Dungeons and Dragons. Keep in mind, at this point, it's the early 80s. Dungeons and Dragons hits its stride in the United States, at least, in, I think, about 82, 83, around that time in the early 80s, right before the I think it's called the Satanic Panic. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
But that's in the United States. Worldwide, I don't think it starts getting into it's out there, but it doesn't start picking up steam for a while on that. But so people in other countries who have played Dungeons and Dragons will use that as a template to build video games based upon RPGs. This is an American guy named Hank Rogers who invents that, except he goes down more in history for his other accomplishments, using Black Onyx as a gateway to get himself into the video game industry in Japan, which will eventually get him into the hands of being the man responsible for bringing Tetris. He's the guy who got Tetris out of Russia and into the United States. He's the one who did most of the legwork for that.
Thank you, Hank Rogers.
Yeah.
So for Daine's case, this is the handheld option for you. Also, you can talk about handhelds on this one.
I don't want to.
That's sort of a kind of a weird case for it. He built the Black Onyx based upon his experiences with Dungeons and Dragons. So if you move on the timeline for a little bit, one of the things that happens for video game RPGs is a grid system. Like, if you ever got it in school, there was like these pieces of paper with dots on them, which you could use to make a grid map. And so you can build that into, it was just 20 dots underneath 20 dots, and you can easily line up a graph to make it look like a map.
I didn't even have those. I just had actual graph paper at that time.
Mm-hmm. But those are the skeletal templates for dungeons and dungeon crawling because it gives you a map for it. If there's a couple of games that you in early 80s or such that were run with this, the Might and Magic series does this, and the Bard's Tale series does this. So you would recruit a team. And one of the funnest things is that you can customize and make your team. Although if you got one of the weirder versions of this, you got a bad, it sucked because like they gave you 6 characters that were the default, and you can create whatever character that you want. Only the first 6 characters had money. You couldn't go to the store. I wanted to make. It was terrible. I wanted to make Scorpio. He is now a noble knight. What's your equipment? 1 sword, and that's it.
1 sword, please.
1 whole sword, please.
Pretty good deal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he got a great deal, but that's because he had to roll high stats to have a sword. Anyone who rolled lower stats came up with a club, and you had to deal with it.
What were you saying, Derek?
Oh, nothing. I was just laughing with that.
Oh, fair.
So.
Oh, fair enough. I was playing Might and Magic, one of the earlier Might and Magics, ironically earlier, and I'm like sitting there going, I got lost in the town, in the main town. Like I left the entrance, and the only thing I could remember is that's where the entrance. You don't get maps. You don't understand how useful a simple overlaid map, not even just a mini map, any map when you're running around a town like this, because I'm lost. I don't know where I'm going. I found the dungeon, which happened to be inside the town. Didn't even realize that was a thing. I tripped and fell into the dungeon. The worst part about it is, remember, my characters had no money. I didn't have a torch, so I'm navigating the dungeon in the dark.
Darkest Dungeons are definitely a different game.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So this will bring up, and at some point I'm going to do an episode about this where all the instructions are in the manual.
Who reads those?
It's a pain when all the instructions are in the manual because, like, they will write out in the manual. No, if you need the spell 1-6 is the spell of light. So make sure you have a sorcerer on your team to cast this, or a wizard. So if you pick no sorcerer or wizard, you don't even have the ability to turn on a light bulb.
I do find it interesting that a lot of games, and tabletop games included in this, but also very much so video games, right, had these sort of ideas, and they typically end up being the most convoluted, difficult things in existence, right? This is much, much later, of course, but the original World of Warcraft, you had resistances. Somebody was like, yeah, elemental resistances is a really cool idea. So, like, if you had armor with fire resist on it, you took less fire damage. But let's make some bosses that require you to have certain resistances in order to even do things to them or to survive their attacks or their spells. And, like, they've done away with it in recent years, but, at the time, they thought that was, like, cool cutting edge gameplay. And this is very similar, right? Where someone's like, yeah, you hit 1 and 6 and light goes off. How cool is that? And it's like, yeah, it's novel to a point, but also needlessly complex.
But yeah, don't worry. By the time they get to Might and Magic, I think 4 or 5, they start implementing things like instructions in the game instead of putting it all in the manual for that.
Insane. Instructions in the game?
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't be me.
And this is old school game thinking. If you've ever heard a buddy Rob, who's been on the show as a game designer, he explains that pretty well. That back in the day, especially on older games, one of the things you had to worry about is memory and space. You had a limit to how many memory and space that you could handle. So there's different things that people would take as shortcuts to try to implement and make things work better. One of the better examples is Super Mario Brothers, which had its limitations as an asset, where it would end up making it so it would start preloading stuff in the towards the end of the game by preventing you from being able to go left. You can never go left, but that means that they don't have to bother drawing anything left. They just only draw what was on the right. And this became novel. If you wonder how novel it is, that becomes the core backbone for Doom. And Doom will eventually become the core background of a ton of RPGs later in life, like Skyrim and Fallout 3, and anything with a first-person shooter aspect for it, because most first-person shooters are tied to Doom one way or another.
Can they run Doom?
Yeah. That aside, though, they did have some shortcuts that they tried to implement. One of the things that we do is tie a specific action to a specific key. This can be problematic. For example, I had that problem with Ultima 4. Hey, Dane, if you wanted to look into the inventory that I have, remember, one of these lovely keys on your keyboard has the inventory. What key would you hit?
Well, I'd probably be wanting to hit I for inventory, but I could also see like B for bag, or like maybe like enter, possibly if it's a weird one.
Yeah, it wasn't any of those buttons.
Oh,
I was for, I believe, ignite.
oh sure, naturally.
And because in case I wanted to turn on a torch, I needed to hit I to do that.
Yeah.
And I believe E was for E was used for something. Was eloquate? It was your speeching button. It was. It took me a while of button punching, but I think it ended up being like X for something that got you into your inventory. Like, that's the problem. I got 27 options. Only one of these is and they try to match it up as best as they can, but it doesn't always work. Doug Larry, once they introduced once they introduced a mouse, things started changing around into that. But yeah, the Might and Magic series is kind of interesting because, and same with Bard's Tales, when you had your characters, you could make like 6 characters. It is assumed that the first 3 characters are your front line and the ones on your back are your back line. So if you put your wizard on position 2, they are as effectively being the guy in front taking on that work toe to toe.
Muscle Wizard cast fist.
No, it didn't work out.
He's just like square up.
I cast squaring up, buddy.
I went to college for catch these hands.
How are you? Well, these hands are rated E for everyone if you mess with it.
What was your minor? Monk. Oh.
But this is where things get crazy for that, right? So, like, people nowadays, retro gaming is kind of a big thing that's been happening lately. Either A, for nostalgia, and B, for just the street cred for it in one way or another, or at least the belief that I could play these games that people told me were hard. Yeah, no, they were. I think Bard's Tale, I finally got to level 10 by dying repeatedly over and over and over and over again. It took me a while to figure out how to level up my character. Yeah, that was like the weird thing, because the game couldn't understand that you wanted to level up your character automatically. So there was always a set of training grounds, somewhere you had to go to trade in your experience points to purchase your level. So that's the dumbest thing, and I'm glad they got rid of it in like every game ever at some point.
I'm still looking for that in real life.
Yeah. Oh my god, I have definitely put some stats in the wrong place.
Same.
I can't remember math, but if you guys need song lyrics, I got you.
But it was, you had to go wander around the town. Also, there's a place in town that you have to do this. Where is it? Who knows? It's on the map that's not installed in this game. And then you have to travel around, find the training quarters, hopefully have enough EXP to actually be allowed to be trained into your profession better, and then have enough money to pay for the training classes, and then you have now officially leveled up to level 2. And this is not an isolated incident, because there's at least 2 big game series. Bard's Tale, it was huge in the 80s. And I think recently, a couple of years ago or such, they had a re-release for Bard's Tale 4, which uses the same system for it. And Might and Magic. Might and Magic doesn't get rid of that system. I don't even know if they still have it in Might and Magic 9 or 10 at this point. But I know they had it at Might and Magic 6 and 7, and that was in the mid-90s. Well, Might and Magic, so like the graphics changed, but the gameplay didn't. What was cool about the later Might and Magic, though, they had better explanation for things. You had a spear, it did 1d9 damage. Also, it was 1d9 plus 1. You need a 9-sided die to do this. I don't even think mathematically you can have a 9-sided die.
I mean, I've got a D30.
Yeah, but that's a 30.
I can get to Whitland.
Yeah.
Get to Whitland.
D10, but you just take one of the sides off.
Just shave it down.
It ain't much, but it's honest work.
Oh, it's like, what is it? I had a scimitar. It does 3 damage. The weirdest thing about that is being a higher level doesn't mean that you're better at weapons or skills or anything. So, say for example, you are level 2 or level 3. if you didn't put your points in that category of like how to use of your sword of sword working, you are a level 3 character, but you're a scrub at the sword because you didn't put points in there. But I put my points in somewhere else. Constitution, just to take the hit in the face. Might and Magic had this weird system. It was you would have to spend so many points to level up this. So here's their level up system, which follow me if you will. Let's say you are a knight. Because also they had only a certain series of classes. So you could have a knight and I think you can have a fighter and a cleric. But there's not really, but there's like only one magic class early on, and there's a couple of messy ones. At some point, I think they don't have a rogue, they have a robber. You are a thief,
legally distinct.
Yeah, legally distinct. And then later they were like, nah, you could have a rogue again. So you would have a knight, and you would have a swordsmanship skill. If you wanted to know how to use a bow, though, travel around town, and you had to find a specific person who would train you the basics of how to use a bow. This would give your character the ability to use a bow. So you didn't start with it. And then you could go around town looking for these extra people who would give you the basics of any of these skills if your class could handle it. It's a mess. You level up, you get the points for that level up, you go back to the trainer. After you go to the trainer, you get these points, you put in the points to whatever class that you want. Once you have put 4 points into a section, now you can go find another trainer somewhere in the world, which will teach you the advanced version of that, which gives you a separate extra series of bonuses on top of having like +1 damage to that sword. And then, if your class will allow it, you can do the same thing again for an even higher tier to get an even bigger.
I know some games are easier these days, and a lot of people like to complain about it on the internet, but I am so grateful I don't have to deal with that. That sounds like a lot, TM.
Sounds like WoW. That's what it sounds like.
A bit like old WoW.
Yeah.
Old WoW, vanilla days.
Yeah.
Cool.
And WoW itself is based on TTPs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Back in the old days when you can only go left, you needed to find your content any way you could. So if that was just hiding where you use the bow, giving players an extra couple of hours of looking around for how they're going to be able to shoot things at range.
Yeah.
I guess that's how you do it.
It's definitely one ways.
The weirdest part, once we started to get into the later Might and Magics, I think this started in 5 or 6. Yeah, Might and Magic 5 or 6. They had higher end graphics now. They were going 32-bit instead of the classic 8 or 16-bit that they had. So they had more to play with, and they made it more into like what we would see as like Skyrim, kinda. So you had 4 characters, so all 4 of you are assumed to be standing in a line at all times, going from maneuvering at first-person shooter. The guy on position 1, he's the dude on the left. The guy in position 2, he's the one in the center. Center left, center right, and then the farthest right. And if the attack comes on the right, it's just going to hit that guy specifically, no one else.
32-bit Skyrim. Todd Howard, you've done it again. Release it.
My personal favorite was a weird bug I bumped into. Not a bug. It actually is a thing that they do in the game. So if you've been playing in Might and Magic 7 for long enough, your characters will actually get tired and exhausted, and you have to go back and rest. You have to have in the game terms of time of been awake for over 24 plus hours, and they're exhausted, and then you have to go rest. So here's what happened. I played Might and Magic 6, which didn't, or one of the early ones, which didn't have it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll dink around with 7 for a bit. Oh, wait, a friend of mine calls. I have to go pick him up and take him somewhere real quick, and then grab food on my way back. Cool. So I get up, I go over there, and then I go get the food, take care of the thing. I get back. I didn't pause the game, so I get back. It's nightfall, and I didn't realize until this, but they've been awake. All my characters have been awake for the last month and a half. They got huge bags under their eyes. They are exhausted. Even worse, there was a set of enemies like goblins that were on the outskirts of the town. They slowly made their way into the town and ended up taking out everybody in town because I just sat in the corner and left.
Can you imagine, being those villagers and seeing these adventurers sitting and staring in a corner, and you're like, could you help? Could you help us? please, there's goblins.
Sir.
And they just continue stare into the corner. Unnerving.
So I get back to my guys. I go back to the inn. I rest. I come back. Ghost town.
Yeah, can't imagine why.
However, all the bodies are still there from both the goblins that were being taken down from the guardsmen, and all the people who are there. And as I mentioned before, mind magic doesn't give you a whole lot of money to start with, so I looted the town.
You're a monster.
It's fine. Mind magic knows that this is going to happen. Once a month, they respawn all the people and monsters again.
Doesn't make it okay.
No, it does not. I left to go get a snack, and when I got back, this is what happened.
That'll teach you.
That sounds like a power gaming strategy, though.
Yeah,
Power
just
leveling.
Run along, go get a snack, and then you'll have all the money you need for the game.
Like those strategies for Skyrim and other games like that, where you'd like go to bed, but you'd stack quarters up on the joystick and leave yourself like sneaking into a corner while you slept at night, or like putting weights on the space bar to do another effect.
I forgot that was a thing too.
I had friends who did that. Yeah, they're like, "Oh, why am I sneaking to be max?" I didn't want to have to wait for it, so
I earned it,
yeah,
kinda.
I slept through it.
But yeah, so like because of the game's limitations of being able to just or either that or and from what I understand, also just the programming lore. Because keep in mind, these things happened that was my Magic 7. At this point, we've gotten multiple RPGs at this point. There's just now we're just doing it this way. At some point in the mid 80s, I think TSR is who held the rights to Dungeons & Dragons originally.
Yes.
Not originally.
Not originally, but yeah, they're one of the most well known outside of Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah,
they're the ones who held it. So, and that's a little bit weird because TSR, there's like 2 or 3 TSRs historically.
Mm-hmm.
Old TSR, often referred to as good TSR, by those in the know, was the ones who held the rights for the long haul before they sold it to Wizards of the Coast for 3rd edition.
Right, it's about 3rd editions when they take over for that. Now, and when they do that, TSR licenses it out, and people are making. There's where they. So those who don't know, in the TTRPG space, there's things called modules, which is just basically an adventure that you just have for your characters that you just go through. From my understanding, modules are great if you're just I want to play an RPG. I just don't want to bother with making a whole campaign. I don't never use the modules, so Dana, fill in the blanks if you can in front of this.
Yeah, so when I
It's
ran
an adventure in a can.
It is. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, Ashwood's absolutely right. When I ran for a local game store here, I did a module on purpose because I didn't feel like I had the energy or the desire to sort of write my own homebrew from scratch. I was a little bit tapped between my own personal game and a couple other projects. So they do make these like adventures in a can where you open to page 1 or page 60 or page whatever, and you go, hey, okay, you're in this citadel and there's goblins. What do you do? And then your friends can kind of go through it. It takes a lot of the heavy lifting off of a DM. I'm not to say that homebrew is bad. I love homebrew. I think it's great, but not everyone has time or energy to homebrew everything. So it can absolutely lead to some really fun adventures and some really cool stuff to see what the official adventure looks like from Wizards of the Coast, TSR, whoever.
Mm-hmm. And that's where they get their start. They're licensing it out to different video game design companies. SSI was a big developer back in the 80s, and they would use this to basically use modules to create as the backbone of their games. So there's a series, and large series, of just home computers and NES game, even back in the NES games, because as Dave put it, it takes away a lot of the heavy lifting on it. So the game only needed enough abilities for what it needed to run. If I recall, not a lot of them allowed you a large amount of character customization either.
Well, it does kind of depend on the system you're working in and what year it is. So to use D&D as the example, though this is not strictly a D&D thing, there's a module that was released in the early 80s, I want to say. I encountered it in the late 80s, called The Keep on the Borderlands. Late 80s, early 90s is probably when I came into it. But Keeping the Borderlands is this sort of starter adventures meant for 1 through 3 level adventures. So you start at level 1, by the end of it you should be level 3. And this was published, I believe, for 2nd edition, if I'm not mistaken.
Most of these are based on the 2nd edition. Like, it's weird because when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, not a lot of video games are based on the 1st edition. It just sort of skipped that.
Oh no, I'm wrong. It was for the base set.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, I just looked it up. It was the Keep on the Borderlands is for the base set. There's another one called The Return to the Keep on the Borderlands, which I believe was 2nd edition. So that may have been where my confusion came in. But it's a great little adventure, that you arrive at a keep. There's you can kind of adopt it as your base. You can make changes to it if you wish to. There's not really rules for that. It's pretty cut and dry. But then you're adventuring into the Caves of Chaos, which is one of the most 80s D&D phrases I've ever heard. And there's like lizard men and goblins and crazy old wizards, and I mean it's just a good time.
But yeah, once the licensing for that goes around and they spread it around for it, this is where we start seeing. Actually, this is where I first bumped into where I heard about Forgotten Realms, because they use Forgotten Realms as a section of Dungeons and Dragons for officially licensed stuff, right?
One of yeah. So originally created by Ed Greenwood, outside of Wizards of the Coast, TSR, D&D in general. It was based on Greenwood's own party, if I'm not mistaken. I think when he wrote the first
originally, yeah,
Forgotten Realms novel, it was sort of like, these are the adventures my friends went on, and that's where we get Elminster of popular fame. Also, Baldur's Gate 3, I guess he's in there as well. And then through him, eventually other fantasy authors sign on to this. So R.A. Salvatore, Bob Salvatore writing the Driss series, probably the most well-known, in my opinion, Forgotten Realms book, which then leads to the popularity of the format, because Greyhawk was initially the home realm for Dungeons and Dragons. That was Gary Gygax's own one. But now in 5th edition, they've transitioned into Faerun, into the Forgotten Realms. So yeah, it's one of the more well-known.
Mm-hmm.
Short story long.
Short story long on this one. But TSR starts this licensing for it, and they start spreading it out. So we have RPGs, video game RPGs like that. We also have some that are similar to what we had with Might and Magic and such. These would end up being like, apparently they had what's called the Order of the Griffin, but they also had sort of a breakdown from where they started. Forgotten Realms is one big section. There is Mysteria, which is another one. Now, this is where I personally in my life figured out about Dungeons and Dragons from a dumb way for it. Not all the 80s and 90s lore of Might and Magic and Swords and Sorcery that I know. No, from the Capcom arcade game Dungeons and Dragons, because that's where I know it more from. Oh, and it was great because they limited everything for that one. I'm like, this is an amazing experience. And then I realized after playing actual Dungeons and Dragons, oh wow, they handicapped me really hard on this one. But it was sort of streamlined because they turned it into a beat 'em up game. And back then, what I was playing as beat 'em ups were X-Men, which is a 6-player beat 'em up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, so great that they ported it 3 times.
Oh yeah.
Can you blame them?
Turtles in Time, that's amazing. So yeah, Mysteria was great. My favorite character was in the second, the Tower of Doom. No wait. The Tower of Doom is the first one. The Flight over Mysteria is the second one. But they all take place in the Mysteria world. They actually have my favorite character to play that is in the second game as the Thief. First off, the Thief looks cool, just cool. Super red hoodie. Hat comes in with completely tight leather pants, ready to roll. And it can do thievy things. If you have that character, because it's the Thief class, you never had to worry about not having keys for chests. By default, this was the cool thing. All the characters had weird actions that they can do by default if you understood what they were in. You pick the cleric, the only character in the game that has healing magic. Just going right off. But also the ability to turn undead. 6 or 7 different ghouls come out, turn undead, fight's done, we move on. But there was also like secret passages, and there is 1,001 different ways to beat this game for an arcade beat 'em up. You can stick around to get EXP, which actually was your score for that. And after a big series of bosses, boss fight, you would go to a shop because to buy potions and healing things for it and gear that you wanted to get. The weird one was when you found all the weird little secrets for it. The thief had the ability to do a slide dash, but if you knew you had the ability to slide dash, if gold or that just fell on the ground, you can slide dash and steal on the slide. Baseball slide, take all the cash. Baseball slide, take all the cash. If you were the fighter, you could pull off moves from Street Fighter and they would still work.
Love that.
So you could do the show you rep on the Ken's like up power uppercut with a sword, and it's amazing.
New character idea.
There was the only thing that was kind of weird with it is that you had the dark mage, the wizard, which was OP as all get out. Like
As all wizards should be.
you start as I think a level 5 wizard, and you have every spell.
Ooh.
Unfortunately, much like Final Fantasy, some of those spells were summons that took forever and pause the whole game for everybody while we wait for it to go through that.
Watch me do my cool magic stuff.
That's what you always say. And yeah, it's cool, but
The first one, it was funny because there was a boss in there that I didn't realize until I understood Dungeons and Dragons that what you were doing was a good thing and then a bad thing. So one of the bosses is a troll. There's text in the game to tell you that if you fight that troll, you can use fire, which would do extra damage, and everyone can easily you can use a bottle of flaming oil. However, if you set it on fire after the fight, it regenerates, and then you have to do the fight again.
that's awkward and backwards from how I would expect that to go.
Yep. No.
Ashwood, you look like you have something to say.
It was the adding fire regenerates it was counterintuitive to me.
I agree.
After they died, because
After they died.
that's the key. If you did it, if you set them on fire before the health bar hits 0, you're fine. But once that health bar hits 0, you stop. Just walk away. You don't need none of this.
Was it a glitch? Like,
Yeah.
No. So what happens is that if you set it on fire, you have to fight it again. You set it on fire a second time, you have to fight it again. And at some point, the guardsmen for on the ship that you are fighting on understand you are not killing it and set it on fire and start shooting tons and tons of silver arrows into it and just ends this boss fight for you.
It's like, dude,
Oh.
stop.
Just stop. Put it down. So there's different things because it understands the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. And so at some point, these guards are still around. So they just come by, end the guy, the troll, and finally decide, fine, it's over. You're done.
Cut me off.
Yeah, I'm cutting you
Right.
off until you learn what you did. It was what people would use that for is because it kept the fight longer, so it would give you an EXP boost.
yeah, grinding.
Sure,
Mhm.
sure.
It is grinding on a beat 'em up. You're paying a quarter to play this game.
I have so many questions.
It is a super fun arcade game. But if you want the funnest way to play it, sadly, don't pick anybody with spells that would keep the game that would stall the game's motion. So the wizard, as powerful as they are, they just eat up time doing all their super cool spells. The elf, which elf is a class, by the way.
Yeah, used
Right.
to be.
Mhm.
Elf, dwarf, and fighter man. Big
Mhm.
three.
The big three.
Yeah.
Because your class was elf, dwarf, fighter, and cleric. And then when the second game came out, they added in wizard and thief.
Yeah, what's funny is the original Dungeons and Dragons didn't even have cleric. It wasn't an option, I don't believe.
No, not in the original one. That was an add-on later. But yeah, so like they gave you an arcade beat 'em up experience with an RPG background. And if you had enough EXP, you would level up. What nobody knew was that there was a level cap. So there was a point where you would stop leveling up.
As a
And then
note,
now it's just a
Boo.
score.
I was wrong. I was thinking of paladin, cleric, fighter, fighting man, and magic user were the
About to-
original three classes.
About to say, I was like,
So I was thinking supplement 1, Greyhawk, added paladin and thief.
Mhm.
Paladin was what I was thinking of.
when was Druid
Uh,
added?
Supplement 3,
Yep.
Okay.
and
Yeah,
then supplement 2 was assassin and monk.
Yep.
Druid was overpowered back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Phew.
That's okay. You'll always get that until I think 5th edition. Almost everyone has their this class is overpowered.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, druid though,
Like you had like an army of like 10 or 11s once you hit like 16. Like you had your own army.
I know this isn't strictly a D&D episode, but I
Yeah.
remember, or we're talking about all tabletops, but I remember I had a friend who was trying to roll a fighter, and he rolled double zeros on his percentile dice, which is real cool. Sorry, he rolled an 18. He rolled an 18, and then if you get an 18, you get to roll a percentile dice to see what percentage of your strength maximum you could use. And he did not get double zeros because that would have been incredible. He got like 13, which basically meant that like his strength was terrible. It didn't really. It was still an 18, which is good, but it was like the low end of 18, which was bad. Wild times.
That is wild times. Planescape's series comes out of that, which
Hmm.
Planescape Torment's one of my favorites on the basis of, honestly, I'll be honest, if you have a game and you have Rob Paulson as a main character, I'm mostly sold. He's like my favorite voice actor of all time.
It's pretty great.
So, like, in that Torment, which is one of my favorite things, is because you can pick and choose what class you want your character to be, which is a fighter or a cleric or a wizard. And one of the key story elements to that is that you have no idea who you are. And because of that, you made sure to have tattoos placed on your back to tell you the story, to let you know as instructions of who you are and what you are doing. But what you lost was the actual information that you need, which is the original journal to find out who you are that you wrote. So Rob Paulson plays this guy named Mort, which is a floating skull, who's like, all right, don't worry, boss, I will read your tattoos. And he reads your tattoos. Yep. Make sure you get out of this dungeon and make sure you don't lose that journal of yours. It is very important to never lose that journal. And try to find your original tomb for that if you can. He's like, I lost the journal. And this gives you an excuse to make a new journal, which is the journal that you use to track your stuff. You go through Planescape Torment, you find your original gravesite, and Mort's with you, and he's like, oh, all these carvings that are on this grave engraved in the stone is the same things that you have on your back. Cool. And so he reads through it. Yeah, make sure that you keep an eye on your journal. Also, don't trust that skull guy who's been floating around. He's a real dick.
Planescape is such a great game.
That's the shorthand, but yeah, that's the way. And we're just going. It was blurry on your back. I couldn't make out all the letters.
I was hoping for we better keep our eyes open for that skull guy.
Yeah, that would have been good.
But yeah, they based it on the Planescape novels and novelization and the Planescape rules for that. So yeah, TSR starts getting into Dungeons and Dragons and they start putting it. And keep in mind the timeline will start moving up and down and all around for this. As time just goes on, we bump into a couple of companies that end up basically not dominating is I think the wrong word, but specializing in RPGs. Black Isle, great. It's my favorite game. That they made. I think they made the Dark Suns, but they made Fallout 2. Interplay had tons of RPGs. Fallout. The Interplay had studios had the first Fallout. They also had Baldur's Gate was the other one that they did. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. That they ended up having. Then there's also and you can't forget SquareSoft. This is pre-Square Enix, and I think SquareSoft and Enix is weird because Enix doesn't do the Dungeons and Dragons thing. They spawn off of classic JRPGs, but JRPGs tend to spawn off of Final Fantasy. But Final Fantasies 1 specifically and 2 were originally based off of classes and things that you had in Dungeons and Dragons. They twisted a couple of things here and there, but speaking of OP classes, the monk was ridiculously OP in Final Fantasy 1 because you did more damage if you had no weapon in your hand.
Honestly, I feel like monk's the best class in Final Fantasy history, just in general. I know a lot of people say dragoon, and I respect that call, but I mean, Sabin suplexes a train.
Yeah, once you suplex a train, what What else is there?
Where do we go from there? You know,
Everyone must have had a ticket to Suplex City.
yeah,
Okay.
he was punching them left and right.
He's punching tickets to Suplex City. Here's the thing. There's two types of players who played Final Fantasy VI. Those who did suplex the train and those who didn't suplex the train. And those who didn't suplex the train, why? Why?
You can't sit with us.
So
I'll see myself out.
Yeah, get out of here.
get out of here. You don't know what you did. You know what you did wrong, actually. You know what you did. You were one of those guys who used Phoenix Down and insta-killed the train.
No, I killed the train the hard way.
Oh, yeah. But no suplex.
Respect.
No.
Respect, though.
No, I didn't like the monk in Final Fantasy 1. I did double fighter, double black mage, and I just dominated. Kill stuff as fast as possible.
Yeah, if you can down DPS them,
Yeah.
you win.
There's also, like, I know there's a challenge to do all white mages.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much your DPS is so short on that.
Could not be me.
I'm not one of those guys, but I've heard
Yeah,
of it.
that's a lot.
1 DPS, please.
What
What if he
Not-
gets hurt? Don't worry. We've got heals for days.
Boink 1. Boink 1.
But they also introduced like elementals that Dave was explaining. Now, Final Fantasy, I think, did it interestingly because like it made sense in their world. If you were fighting anything that was undead, you would just heal them, and it would count as damage. Also, vice versa. If you did anything insta kill, it would bring them back. My favorite is if you ever play Final Fantasy VI and you use Edgar, there's a hidden weapon that you can get, which is a chainsaw. If you the chainsaw has a chance to instantly kill any certain enemies, or most enemies, I think, just not bosses, but even with bosses, does a crap ton of damage. However, when he insta kills, puts on Jason's hockey mask, goes to town, and just rips and tears into the guy.
I was hoping he would shout groovy.
However, if you were in the land of the dead, he'll put on the hockey mask, rip and tear, kills the guy, and it comes right back, and he doesn't learn.
I also wish he had said groovy.
I would wish that too. But yeah, so like Final Fantasy, at least in the first couple of ones that they're based upon Dungeons and Dragons as their core flow. However, they spin off of that and end up becoming, I think, about 3 or 4 is when they stop allowing, when they go through that period where they don't allow you to pick your class. It's just this is the class that you have, and that's part of the storyline that we're working with. There is, and we talked about this in the Final Fantasy costume episode, ironically enough, there's a reason for that. The main reason for that is you can focus on your story more if you don't have classes to deal with. If you're not having to worry about the mechanics, you can go with more of the story. Now that's and that sort of depends on how your programming and things work in the game itself. But for the most part, mechanics can bog things down. People forget that Shadowrun, which is an amazing game from the 80s, had not 1 but 2 different games out there for before it got to like the Xbox games and various the new iteration. Shadowrun's weird.
Shadowrun had a fantastic demo for the Xbox 360. That was a first-person shooter style game, and it was basically an arena shooter, like back when you were like just having the inklings of Call of Duty, and it was phenomenal. We played for hours and hours. Loved it. Never knew it was a tabletop game, and for probably about 10 years.
So that's where it was like we had a weird detriment. There was the people who came in knowing it was an arena shooter and loved the game for an arena shooter. From what I understood, yeah, Shadowrun was actually pretty cool and pretty legit for that. However, everyone who came in for Shadowrun wanted an RPG. You have picked the wrong game.
Oh yeah.
I played Shadowrun back in the SNES, which is designed as an RPG that I could not understand. Like, I have a health bar. I do not know how much health damage I have or how much health I have in general.
I don't understand Shadowrun in general.
Shadowrun, it could be complicated.
I'm just not that intelligent, I guess. I don't got it in me.
Do I need to run a game for you?
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
legit. Shadowrun's on my list of games I need someone to run this with for me because I could not. I've tried
Mission accomplished. We got him.
Is Shadowrun the one? Shadowrun's joke is you need a bathtub of 6-sided dice.
Oh yeah,
to
oh yeah.
And a degree in like quantum physics.
Like the one game I played of it, we had one guy who was good at one thing. He rolled 37 dice, but everything else he just couldn't do.
It's a lot of dice.
Yeah, but did he do that really well? Really well.
Yeah.
Did he try the hammer approach? When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, like no, it's funny because he was assassin. He could kill somebody. Talking to somebody he couldn't do. Opening the door really hard. Like, but if he needed to slice that door, oh man, it was gone.
All right, we're gonna need to cut this door open.
Right? Like it's like the whole thing of like, do we trust the door? Let's just cut it open.
Insanity.
I do one thing really good here. I do know that Shadowrun Returns was tried, and it was a pretty successful thing on it. Still was hard for me to understand, but easier for me to understand than regular Shadowrun.
That's not saying much.
Now, Shadowrun, for those who love it, but that's the same as like various different TTRPGs. And me and Dan have talked about in the past episodes. You, with Rob, you kind of want to know. There's games out there for everybody out there. So if you have a TTRPG that you like, you could just go with it. That's perfectly fine for it. When they try to convert it into video games, go for it. One of the funnest ones that I played was Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Bloodlines or the first one?
The first one.
Oh, really?
Although I
You're a
have
first
both,
one fan. Okay.
Actually, I was bigger. Bloodlines was the one I put more hours into, and they were both great.
Oh, Bloodlines, like the first one's really good. Takes place in the medieval period. It's very, very different from a typical vampire story. Plays a little bit more like Legacy of Kain in my mind.
Half of it does.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a
So
fair
at
point.
some point you do a time skip in there, and you end up in the future because there's a whole clan that goes away.
Yeah. Which is true for the tabletop game as well. Really enjoyed it. Really liked it. But Bloodlines was it's so good, right? I'm gonna get on my soapbox for just a second, but Bloodlines was so good that they have been trying to make a sequel to it for 20 years, and they announced the sequel. When did they announce that?
It was it recent?
Like 2019, I want to say, maybe 2017. I don't remember when it was exactly announced, but it has been through development hell, which is very, very. Bloodlines 1 came out in 2004. And then in 2000 and sometime. Oh, no. I'm having trouble finding it. I'm just thinking like 2023, but it was. Oh, wait.
Yeah, because the first one is just Vampire the Masquerade, and then the second game is Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines, and Bloodlines is
it's so
super fun. I forget.
2019.
I think in Bloodlines they let you literally get to pick your clan.
You get to make your own character.
Everything. Pick everything.
February 2019 was when it was teased. Bloodlines 2, and as of current writing, in 2020, it was supposed to be released. Obviously, that didn't happen. They announced the change in developers and a February 2021 date. Game was delayed past 2021. In 2023, there was another new developer announced. So honestly, if that game comes out, I bet it's going to be trash. I hope it's not. I really hope it's not.
I hope it's not. But like the statistics of the game taking forever and
3
also
or
being
4
good,
developers, like
still shorter than it hasn't hit Duke Nukem Forever levels.
Well, sure.
Developers. That's developer on developer on developers on developers. That is a meme that turned out to be reality.
This might be a bit of a hot take. For what it was, I kind of enjoyed it. To be honest, I kind of like Duke Nukem Forever, like unironically.
Oh, that's fair.
I don't know what that says about me as a person, but like, yeah, I kind of enjoyed it.
Everyone, get in the comments and tell us what you think that says about Dane as a person.
Oh no!
Please use your nicest language.
Yeah,
right. I have to rethink a lot of things now, Dane.
Okay. When I play a Duke Nukem game, what am I expecting? I know this is way beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but I want stupid jokes. I want
Yes.
gunplay, and I want like a mission that this guy is on and he can solve, right? It's like Doom. I want to rip and tear through demons, and I don't really care what's happening in the background. I just want to like explode some demons with my big gun.
Right.
And that's
Give me a
kind of
story. That's fine. But honestly, I'm here for ripping and tearing.
yeah.
I mean,
And
just-
like that's kind of what Duke Nukem Forever delivered. There were stupid jokes. There was barely any plot, which is pretty normal for a Duke Nukem game, I would say.
Mhm.
And there was guns. Like no
Oh,
notes.
No notes.
Was it great? No, but like it wasn't bad.
It's like-
It was
it's
because
having
it's Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem is bad.
Yeah, it's like having a B movie. You know what you came in
Yeah,
here for.
I
A B
don't-
movie schlock. You know what you came here for.
Yeah, I don't go into the into oh my god, Leo, your favorite movie,
Army of Darkness.
Army of Darkness, Your Evil Dead, expecting like super complex, over the top graphical effects and that sort of thing. No, I go into it to see Bruce Campbell being Bruce Campbell in a hilarious movie that also has zombies.
If you want to know how much that they put that into it, the opening credits is Bruce Campbell versus the Army of Darkness.
right.
That's what they say at the beginning, and I'm like sold in.
He's the guy.
But no, Bloodlines, amazing
So
story
good.
and so good. And I know so Bloodlines is a 3D is a third person game RPG, and they use the template for Vampire the Masquerade. Interesting on the left, there's a couple of clans that they don't have in the game. Now, from what I understand, technical limitations. The more complex you have it, the more you need for it, and this was already pushing what the developers could do at this time. Anyway, but they had a great story. It's amazing, and from what Rob's told me about the plot, there's a good chance that the main character from the first game is there somewhere. But yeah, you got to see the underground where the Nosferatu, which are basically they all look like Nosferatu. They look like him, but they're in underground. If you want to, you can play as one of the Nosferatu. It's hard because you have all their defects too.
Mhm.
You want to talk to people, you can't really. I don't think you can. I think you have to do a lot of tweaking in order to be able to play a Malkavian because of what their abilities are.
Yeah, it's something available, but it is a little bit. It can be a little touch and go.
The Malkavians are traditionally like they're madness. They've gone crazy as part of their abilities, but they also have clairvoyance and various other abilities that are far beyond the norm from most of the vampire clans that exist.
Yeah, they are cursed with future sight, but they can tell no one about it. So they can see the future surrounding certain things or objects or people, depending on what each individual flavor they have. But due to their bloodline curse, they cannot tell anyone about it. So they go insane because why? Yeah, checks out. Why wouldn't you?
See Cassandra, circa back in Greek mythology.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But yeah, so they talk to you in riddles for the Malkavians. They're a fun conversational type. And I started going, okay, what?
Run that by me one more time.
What I found was interesting in Bloodlines, they have humans as bosses and characters that you deal with, but their stats are based upon humans in the Bloodlines. So the thing is that vampires have their vampire strength and abilities for it. Certain humans, though, have basically faith as their powerhouse, and they use that as to be able to. They don't actually cast magic per se, as they do. It fuels them to do these other abilities to keep them going.
Absolutely.
It's one of my favorite like weird tropes where they don't do it very, but it can be easily done very badly. Dylan Dog, the Night. It was a movie back in the early 2000s. Starring Brandon Roth, and it was basically he's a human who is also a detective. But all the monsters that are running around Louisiana hire him specifically, and he's there to keep everyone neutral. The thing is, the one time he lets himself go nuts, he has leveled clans. The key thing of the movie is the monsters may be big and powerful, but they're really scared of people when they get crusadery.
Well, I never think. I think Underworld actually calls that out verbatim, where they're like, "Look, we keep the peace between us and the werewolves because, without that, the humans would, overcome us. There's so many more of them than there are of us.
Mhm.
We would be overrun in a heartbeat." And that's something I've always really liked about the World of Darkness in general, is the ability to, like, Hunter the Requiem and the Hunter game in general is about a bunch of people who saw some messed up stuff that they could not explain, like a vampire or a werewolf or a ghost or a mage, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
And instead of being like, nope, didn't see it, I'm going to go to therapy and we're going to put this behind us, they were like, I have to stop this. I have to do something about this now. And I think that's so neat a concept. Like, well, vampires are real. Okay, let's do this.
Let's go.
Like,
Supernatural runs with the whole series.
it's
Right.
pretty much what that is, right?
So, fun take with that. If you ever go back and look up any video games based on Hunter, the Reckoning, the Hunter side of, I think White Wolf is the name of the company.
White
that makes
Wolf,
both. So, Hunter the Reckoning, where it's basically, as Dane says, all right, monsters are real. Get my gun. Let's go. They are all designed as beat 'em ups, as action games. Meanwhile, Vampire the Requiem is the Vampire the Masquerade are all based upon RPGs, storylines, building your way around the world, using your finesse, and by and large, in a lot of those, because Vampire the Masquerade is a social based TTRPG, so that's so they want to go with their realms on how they implement this. I'll be honest. I was talking to Rob once about this, and he actually in college played a Vampire the Requiem game. He eventually left the game on the base, and he did a bunch of stuff when he because as Dane knows from previous podcasts, the man knows and understands the game mechanics. Once he figured it out, he ruled the entire thing. And that's actually in play for Vampire the Masquerade. You could be just a lonely guy, work your way to the top, and become and be the new prince of the town if you do it right.
Yeah, one of the things it does a lot better than I think D&D does is the social aspect, right? This is a social game. There is machinations and plots and plans and alliances and betrayals, and I mean, it can be as much or as little as you want to, just like any other RPG, right? But it makes an emphasis on the importance of these things.
So another one I wanted to bring up. But yeah, so Vampire the Masquerade, amazing. Honestly, if you want to get into it, the first one's really good, but Bloodlines is better, just in general.
Hopefully, Bloodlines 2 will be even better than the first one, and I super believe this is possible.
But yeah, so the other one series I want to bump into is Fallout. Fallout was a weird case on this. So they wanted to make video game came out previously in the 80s called Wasteland, and they used that as sort of a template to make the game Fallout. The original designers for the first Fallout game in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, when they did this, built a tabletop RPG for the to use as the game. Now, mostly they did that because of a numerical thing. So one of the things that they wanted to do is have that experience with TTRPGs where you roll dice, and so there's a little bit of luck that you have to deal with. So to work luck into a stat to make it work mathematically in a video game where you technically don't have luck if you because it's just programming. If you go left, you will always go left, right? You go right, you go right. So with that, they added luck as a stat, but to make luck as a stat work, they basically built an entire TTP RPG to put into this game to have luck as a role that you could feasibly have. So it's weird because they built a TTRPG for a game, and I think it's not until recently, after the success of the Fallout TV show, that they actually started releasing their own TTP RPG. Which is weird to say because it's basically, you have it. I want this. I want to play a Fallout game on this. But if you ever play Fallout 1 or Fallout 2 and you click on any of the stats that are in there, they actually have the mathematical formulas for how the stats are built and what gets to those stats for it. One of the reasons why I liked it is because random encounters is a thing you deal with, and they are various random encounters. And if you play Fallout 2, they are randomly random encounters. I believe I bumped into King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table,
That's
who are looking for
Wow.
how. No, so. And they're all in power armor because this is the Fallout world. And the King Arthur asks me, "Do I know where the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch is?" And I say no, because I don't know it. However, and every time you start the game of Fallout 2, somewhere in the world is hidden the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Do you have to count?
Actually, when you throw it, he does the count for it.
Classic.
There's also the Bridge of Death there too.
Gorge of Eternal Peril.
Yeah. There's also, you can find Godzilla. So here's the list of the random encounters that I've personally found. That's not all of them. This isn't even a tenth of everything that I found. I found the bar in the middle of nowhere, which has the cast from the first Fallout game sitting hanging out. And if you go there, you can recruit. That's how you can recruit dog meat, because you have dog meat from Fallout 1 that you can just recruit there. You can also, what's funny is because there's a guy named Ian who's the other character you can recruit in Fallout 1, and Ian's basically complaining that he didn't get to be put in the sequel. I found Godzilla's foot. I found the time tunnel from Star Trek. There is Doctor Who's TARDIS. A crashed shuttle from the USS Enterprise.
Ooh.
Also has the best healing item in the game if you find it. Didn't work for everybody who got in the crash, but that's neither here nor there.
They were all red shirts.
They're all red shirts. Actually, they are all red shirts. If you examine them all, they all are all red shirts.
Checks out.
And I found the wizard. There is a wizard running around in Fallout. It's a hidden boss you can deal with. Casts magic spells, and he's annoying.
Ashwood, come get your people.
The Wizard of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
He.
But yeah, so then that's only the ones I remember having. There's references all over the place, and there's other random encounters you can bump into. I don't remember what the random encounter was, but I found a solar-powered laser gun. Worked great until it got dark.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be an issue.
Oh man, reload. But yeah, so there's random encounters galore with that. In fact, it was so loved that because the guys who worked on that were Black Isle, and when they added a special add-on for your character because most of the people who worked on it in Black Isle also worked on New Vegas, which is why there's a special, I think it's some kind of mysteries that you can add into there, and so there's little random things that are just in the world if you can find it, like the refrigerator and hat of Indiana Jones that he hidden. But yeah, so that Fallout's kind of a weird case where they basically built the TTRPG first and then made the game, but they built it for the game. Outside that, and Zombie Ham want to make sure that I mentioned this, Cyberpunk 2077. Yeah. Cyberpunk started originally as a TTP RPG back in the 80s. In the 80s, Cyberpunk and Cyberpunk talk was kind of a big thing back then. And this is around the time Blade Runner came out on TV, but in novels and novelization, there's tons and tons of books about Cyberpunk and Cyberpunk aesthetic worlds. Still no cybernetic cyber dragons when you connect yourself to the internet.
Yet.
That's Shadowrun.
Yeah, that's true. That is more Shadowrun.
Yeah. And that would be about all the ones that I've personally dealt with. If there's any other TTP RPGs that you can think of that transferred into a video game,
Icewind Dale,
yeah.
Which is a Baldur's Gate. Neverwinter Nights is on there as well, both of which came out of the success of Baldur's Gate. Icewind Dale being another place in the Forgotten Realms, so it's very similar to Baldur's Gate. But there's a part of me, to be honest, that kind of hopes they do an Icewind Dale 3 a la Baldur's Gate 3. I think that could be cool.
I guess now would be where we talk about Baldur's Gate. Here's where sort of this caveat in. There's been articles written from Baldur's Gate 3 specifically, where Baldur's Gate 3 is probably the closest we have to that with all the thousands of options that you could have that you could do in a TTP RPG. And that's sort of and there was a big debate when Baldur's Gate 3 started coming out, and when people noticed this might be the future of how you can do a TTP as a video game.
And
because Baldur's Gate had tons and tons of options, and they have tons and tons of things on there for it.
they're right. My one complaint with it is that you only go to level 12, but I totally understand why Larian didn't want to go into level 20, because that sucks.
Larian is it Larian Entertainment that makes it? I'm trying to remember what.
I think so. What were you
Larian
saying?
Studios, yeah.
Larian Studios, thank you. Larian Studios. Now they've done other things before that, but they also have their mitts hardcore into TTP RPGs. Divinity and Original Sin.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Then the Divinity series were all based upon TTP RPGs on that. I didn't play much of it because one of the things that attracted me to the Divinity series is because as a TTP RPG, there's very few of them that let you do a multiplayer option.
Yeah.
And I believe that's mostly in design for that. Just it's a lot of options that you need to give somebody to give them all these options on that.
Yeah, it's a ton of work. I mean, honestly, I don't know that there are a lot of studios that could pull off a Baldur's Gate 3. I think that there are some out there, and there will likely be more in the future, but it's one of those things where Baldur's Gate 3 is phenomenal. It's such a fantastic game. It's very well done, very true to the source material in a lot of ways, but they also took some creative liberties where they could. Kind of hits the high notes of what a D&D game could be in video game form. And I think that's lovely.
And that's
I think
kind of where the origins of this whole episode came up.
Yeah, Ashwood?
I was going to say, I think the hard part of capturing a TTRPG in video game format is that player choice is ultimately going to boil down how faithful you are to that adaptation. Because when you're playing a TTRPG, it is all about your imagination and what you come up with and how you would guide your character's actions. And so when you have to include programming, you're essentially going, okay, how many options are we going to give a player? You're saying, oh, this is everything we need to factor for. And the thing that Larian did is they didn't stop at 3 or 4 options. They said, okay, if they do this, then they'll meet the imp. And if they meet the imp, then what can happen if they go on and they squash the imp? Or what if they talk to the imp and take its little quest? And you go on and that means that da 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 da. Oh, all right, so now you're a vampire thing. Like your vampire character is now doing all kinds of crazy nonsense, and so they've essentially taken what is the essence of an RPG, which is choice, and given it life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I got away from myself a little bit. Just
no, that made perfect sense to me, honestly. I think you're absolutely right.
Can I say something also about that?
Yeah.
I haven't said a lot, but I think what Ash going to they think even further in that because they didn't do a linear system with the choices. Like you can take this quest, you don't have to do it now. You can come back way later after you've done all this other stuff. And how does this, you not doing this right now, affects the rest of the story? Like that's, I didn't know if that's where you're going with that, but that's just what I liked is that like you had all these quests and there's no direct linear order you get to do them in.
Yeah, and to the point for that one, this is one of the first RPGs I have ever seen where people, as a play mode, basically plays it where it lies. Like, it's been decades before people talked about scum saving, and Baldur's Gate 3 comes out, and scum saving is now back on the chopping board, and it's a different experience if you just don't. If you take every roll as it lies, and nobody will fault you if you decide to play it. That's a mode, but I forgot what they call it when you don't.
Honor mode.
Honor mode. So where you do honor mode, where you just take it where it lies, but no one's gonna fault you if you're going to just have to scum save just to see what options that you're doing. Remind who was on the show. Basically wanted to get as many romance as the best happiest ending as possible and just try to roll everything for that. Meanwhile, I'm going through this roll, I go semi-honor. If I fail a roll, I'll just let it where it lies. But if my characters are having a total party wipe, nope, I'm reloading that mess.
Ashwood and I know somebody who not only has completed honor mode and tactician mode, but has done a solo honor mode, meaning one character in the party.
Wow.
It's insanity, honestly. It does not sound fun at all to me, but they seem to really enjoy it, and I'm happy for them. You know?
Mhm. But Ashwood's right. One of the hardest things to give a TTRPG is the odds of choice. How many different choices can a programmer put into a game to allow you to do this? And as we've seen from the older style games into the current one, giving more choices is always the struggle. To get if you ever hear a TTRPG story, there's always someone who's doing a choice that is somewhat wacky, or they're putting it online, or in some cases like, oh yeah, I've got one little shot to do this. Let's roll the dice on that, baby. And maybe I come out win big, or I'm going home.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, if you're like, hey, I'm gonna climb out the window, in a TTRPG. You can do that, like probably, right? There may be a role associated with it. But if you're like playing Baldur's Gate and you're like, I'm gonna climb out this window, like if there's not a window there for you to climb out of, that's that, like you're not climbing out the window.
What was it? There was a set of treasure chests I was playing through in Baldur's Gate where they were on this top floor, and I wanted to get the treasure chest, except something happened with the character Karlak, and they set the stairs on fire.
I hate it when that happens.
And I'm like, oh man. I'm like, well, this chest isn't it. Could this chest ever? We can't get this chest. I look at it again. I go, hang on, Karlak's a barbarian. They can jump hella high. Use jump to the second floor, got the chest. Everything was fine, and then Karlak fell.
Oh.
It's funny because I was kind of embarrassed with this one because I was playing through and I the character Gale, and at some point I took off Gale's robes and traded for something else for some armor, like their original default robes. And I was explaining to somebody that they're like, oh, so have you kept Gale's old robes? I go, I lost them. And they're like, how did you lose them? I mean, I put them in a box somewhere. I literally lost the box. I don't remember because I stopped playing for like a month. They came back like, I remember putting it in a box somewhere. Where did I put the box?
Why is my wizard naked?
The world may never know.
And I stole the box from back in the tutorial.
They weren't using it.
Yeah, it was an accident. I'm like,
Right. Loot everything.
I just have this box in my pocket. I keep all the time.
Somewhere there's an NPC with a set of robes in their pocket, being like, how did these get here?
But yeah, as far as TTP RPGs, that's sort of the goal, is to, and Baldur's Gate 3 really hit it out of the park by giving you a ton of options, consequences, and options for that. Arguably, as far as this game, Baldur's Gate 3 will probably have a ton of replay value just because there's different ways to play it.
Yeah. I don't know if it beats out Baldur's Gate 2 for me, but it's real close, which is a weird thing to say for me.
Yeah, everyone has their favorites. Like, as much of a big Fallout fan as I am, Fallout 2 is where my jam always is. And that's just the one that I've had the most fun with.
Sure.
But yeah, these are the ones I wanted to bring up. Baldur's Gate was the big one because Baldur's Gate started off similar to all the other, because I think the first one was built by Black Isle or Interplay.
Black Isle, I believe.
Yeah, but Baldur's Gate played similarly to various other RPGs that were around at that time, and they were all based on especially in the 90s. That was the goal, trying to make a TTP RPG that you could make, at least in the realm of the PC world. In the realm of the consoles and the handhelds, it was more about keeping up with the big player in that, which is Final Fantasy.
What was that second word you said?
I don't remember.
Handhelds? I don't know what that is.
So, like, here's the funny thing with the handhelds. The handhelds took whatever TTP RPGs that were for their game systems as sort of the older versions of what was originally out for the console. A lot of them were just imported in for that.
True.
Like, jokes aside with the handhelds.
Yeah.
They handheld, they do have their options for that.
Yeah, one of the first D&D video games I ever played, other than Baldur's Gate, was on a Game Boy.
I think those are the big players, at least the ones that I experienced. is there any one of these that you guys have? Anybody else here has played that we haven't mentioned on this one?
No, I mean,
I don't think so.
Did a pretty good job covering.
All right, hit all the big ones. Yeah, I nailed it this time. There are other ones out there.
Very much
A
so.
lot of them are in the and I kind of want to go to around to take a look at this for abandonware. Abandonware is a nickname for old software which has basically gotten defunct or put into the public domain. There are places to find them for it. GOG, Good Old Games, actually has a collection of some of these older TTP RPG type games that are available out there. Whichever one that you as the audience member want to sort of explore, that's really sort of where you want to lean with. Honestly, I think thematics is the best way to work with this. And I say that because if you are into, say, wanting to do something more post-apocalyptic, that's actually why Fallout got its claim to fame originally, was because back when it came out in 97, most of the RPGs that were around were all swords and sorcery. There's nothing wrong with it, but this was the first one in a long time that they didn't see sword and sorcery, that it was post-apocalyptic, and it was designed really well for that one. But if I'm going to go with one that I would definitely want to go back to, I do want to finish my back into Blood Vampire or the Masquerade Bloodlines. And there's been other ones that are out there too. Keep in mind that we're talking about TTP RPGs. Other RPGs spawn off of other RPGs. Technology and video game entertainment spawns off of other technology and video game entertainment. For a big example, Hades and Hades 2 coming out recently is a rogue-like game. And all of those have to call themselves rogue-like game because Rogue is the one that started way back in the 80s. And if you do your there's a whole thing about roguelikes even being disappearing from the majority of game design for a while.
Roguelike, Souls-like, everyone, there's a like for everything.
There's Doom-like. Actually, like is kind of the nickname for a lot of these games.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to so before I close this out, yeah, you would want to find the one that you appeal to. So for everybody here, what is the one that appeals to you the most as far as one of the games that are out there? Doesn't matter if it's newer, older, whatever. For me, as I've stated before, Fallout 2 is my bread and butter. And I can tell you right now, it's not because of the game of choice, it's because of the randomness that can just randomly happen. You're going through post-apocalyptic, needing to solve problems around the wasteland, and oh, here's the TARDIS. Here you go. Enjoy that. What? How did this TARDIS get here? And the doctor just disappears out of the blue before I can investigate. Well played, TARDIS. Will I bump into this again? But the fact that there's these little super random breaks in the middle of a fairly serious game, you could do that. Or the fact that they make weird references in the game, like you can avoid a conversation by telling somebody inside this power plant that you're turning back on, and everyone's like, "Hang on, what's going on in there?" We have a weapons malfunction in the system back here. How's your day? You literally quote Star Wars, and that'll get you through the day. And if you have enough speech and skill on that one, you can talk your way through a lot of games. And I love the fact that that's an option. As much as I like doing combat, any game that gives me an option to avoid it makes me feel smart to do that. But yeah, so for my bread and butter, that's the big reasons why I stick with Fallout 2 as my favorite. Post-apocalyptic, but randomness. And that appeals to me.
I think for me, the one that kind of stands out the most, the one that I've probably the most hours on, I've got 200 hours on the enhanced edition on Steam, and that's not including the decade I had with the physical discs, good old physical media. So I'm sure it's like, I'm over 1,000 at this point. I've played this game so much, I absolutely love it. Would have to be Baldur's Gate 2. Similar to Fallout 2 in that regard. I love the random encounters. As an example, if you wander around as a character named Drist, and you have a reputation under a certain amount, when you meet Drist, because he's in the second game, he basically is upset with you for impersonating him. There's a bunch of weapons. If your skill in thievery is high enough, you can steal his scimitars as well, and then you can run around with his weapons It's just a bunch of little Easter eggs like that. I think it's incredible the stuff that they hide within these games. There was a Easter egg, I believe, in Baldur's Gate 3 about Baldur's Gate 2 called Yoshimo is Willing. There's a character named Yoshimo, and one of the phrases he says over and over and over and over again, every time you click on him, is Yoshimo is Willing. So there's a book you can find, I believe, called Yoshimo is Willing, and it's all about him, I guess. And so just things like that, kind of the randomness. You rest at camp for the evening, and oh no, there's goblins, and you kill them. Maybe one of them has a magic item or whatever. I don't know. I adore that game. Bloodlines is a really close second, though.
Oh yeah. What about you, Ashford?
I would definitely have to say that Baldur's Gate 3 is the one that takes the cake for me. Like I said earlier, it just captures that essence of choice that I think is so essential to being able to play an RPG, a TTRPG,
Mhm.
because I'm given all these options, and they're, for the most part, what I would have done as a character so far. Is most of the time I'm choosing to be an uppity wizard, and so there's always an uppity wizard option, and so the game knew to expect from me as a player, and I've been able to lean into that, and so it's really mimicked that sort of illusion of choice that you get. But Fallout 4 would probably be my second, just because of fond memories of playing it.
Oh yeah. Fallout 4 was a weird one because it, game wise, as far as gameplay, it's probably one of the most smoothest ones that they have for the Fallout series. The only thing, even as a Fallout fan, that I didn't like and a lot of people didn't like, is you had such a limited conversation options, which didn't detriment it, but keep in mind, Fallout 1 and Fallout was famous for being able to talk your way out of everything if you needed to.
I think there used to be a mod that was really popular for Fallout 4, because they would essentially give you the choice of things to say, but they wouldn't give you exactly what you were going to say. So you were given like the options of like, tell him he has a nice hat, tell him he has an okay hat, tell him you don't like your hat. You don't like his hat. And if you chose like, oh, well, I don't like his hat, I'll tell him I don't like his hat. And it would be like, that hat came from the pig's anus, and you, sir, are worse than one for wearing it. And you would just be like, no, I just didn't like the hat.
You really
Whoa!
didn't like the hat.
Oh.
And so, like, the mod made it like, this is exactly what you're going to say. Please be aware you're about to call a man a pig's anus.
I want you to know I was coming up to you at a 5. You gave me a 10 here. I don't. We need to calm that now. Derek, what about you?
It's kind of hard for me because I did play a lot of Final Fantasy 1 and 2. For like, I literally had Final Fantasy 1 on my phone at one time because they actually released it for the iPhone. So I was literally had a mobile version of Final Fantasy 1. But I've like Fallout 4, Fallout, and Baldur's Gate are all like just hearts to me because I back when Fallout 4 came out, I spent my entire college Thanksgiving break playing Fallout 4 from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, just nonstop. And I was just researching it, having fun, just redoing things. If I didn't like something, I would replay the scene just because I didn't like the the outcome of it. Like, I was that kind of person. Not whether or not it was the good outcome. I just didn't think it was cool, I guess. So, but like the opposite of that is with Baldur's Gate. Is I absolutely love in my opinion, the realism of it from a tabletop to an actual visual learner. Because my players in my game didn't really understand how far away 35 feet was until they actually played the game. And then now they're like, oh, there's range, 35 feet. I can only go this far. I'm like, yeah, that's 35 feet in the game. They're like, everything makes way more sense now. That's my thing is I actually use Baldur's Gate 3 as a learning tool for my players to get better at the game and actually learn how to do stuff, resource management. And they've actually used that kind of stuff on the tabletop and are better players now because of it. Like, so like I have a lot of different things that are dear to my heart, and all three of those are like that.
Yeah, I think to kind of continue your point, 5 feet. A lot of players like, oh, I can't hit him. I'm not within 5 feet. Like that's so close, and it's like it's not really that close. Like
Yeah.
5 feet's pretty far away when you think about
Mhm.
it. I think the average height's what 5'9", 5'10",
Mhm.
typically.
Yeah.
Like
Typically, yeah.
that's 10 inches more than like you being in a square hitting somebody in their square. Like it's just oh, I've got
Yeah.
reach. I've got a 10-foot reach. Like what?
It says I got a
Dang.
10-foot reach. No, it's a 10-foot pole.
You can hit somebody from forever.
All right. But I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Now, if you out there have the TTP RPGs that we didn't mention, feel free to add them into the list. I'm always looking to explore and find out what new and fancy games that are out there because there's a ton. As much as I want to have the latest and greatest games that I get on my Steam account, I also will go back to my GOG account to see what's the oldest ones that are out there, and they're all over the place. And there's some crazier ones that we haven't talked about too much. Darklands is a game that very few people know about, but if you're in the know, Darklands is Skyrim before Skyrim, and it's got a weird open world gaming, also built by the same team who did Civilization. It is wacky. I literally prayed to a deity to get myself out of a town once. Granted, it was because I was I did a lot of bad things in this town. But they were all bad people. But the guards did not see that way.
Cool motive, still murder.
Exactly. And the worst part about that is that the whole thing started with the fact that I couldn't climb a rope to save my life. I can have enough divine powers to and religious background to pray to to Saint Michael to throw me out of a city, but I couldn't climb a rope to save my life. But yeah, that being said, the next episode will be available out in July 19th. That being said, thanks everybody for listening into this podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks for everybody. This is Gaming Theater Podcast. Logging out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.